37 CE, Rome, the beating heart of an empire that stretched across 3 continents, growing in power, yet teetering on the edge of chaos. For less than 100 years, Rome's emperors have shared power with the Senate, but they hunger for more.
Behind the marble and grandeur of Rome's imperial palace lies a world of court politics defined by intrigue and by murder.
At the center of it all is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to history as Caligula. Caligula was born into one of the most powerful dynasties in human history, and in Rome, being born to power means living under the constant threat of danger.
His reign as emperor begins with the promise of a great leader. He is enormously popular with the people.
Caligula would have been seen as a savior of sorts by the people, but that didn't really reflect what was going on behind the scenes.
But after only 3 years, his reputation has spiraled into infamy.
Corruption, perversion, cruelty and paranoia. He plays power games. He takes sadistic pleasure in humiliating people. He threatens to have them executed.
In some ways, Caligula is the ancient equivalent of the rock star who trashes his hotel room just to prove he can.
Caligula has gone down in history as a depraved and sadistic psychopath.
This is a man with absolute power, and no one can predict what his next move is going to be. That creates a climate ripe for paranoia and betrayal.
Caligula's story shows how power can corrupt, and how betrayal often comes from those closest to us.
He's right to be paranoid. He's surrounded by people who want him dead. He paved the way for his own betrayal.
The story of Caligula begins not in Rome, but in the province of Germania, where as a small boy, he lived a military life with his father Germanicus and mother Agrippina.
Caligula's father, Germanicus, is one of the great military heroes of the early empire. For much of Caligula's childhood, he is on campaign on the empire's northern frontier. And Germanicus brings his family with him. So Caligula is growing up in the Roman military camps.
It's here that he is given the nickname that would endure to this day.
His mother used to dress him up as a little Roman soldier. He was like the army mascot. He had the same military uniform that they did, right down to the standard issue hobnail sandal boots, which were called Caligulae.
We owe Suetonius, a Roman historian writing in the early 2nd century CE, for the story of Caligula's nickname.
It was to the jokes of the soldiers in the camp that he owed the name of Caligula, he having been brought up among them in the dress of a common soldier.
The joke stuck. To the soldiers, he was Caligula, Little Boots. But to Rome, he was still Gaius, heir to the most powerful bloodline in the empire.
So much of how we see imperial Rome today comes from Suetonius. And he gives us this vision of a world defined by personality, by passion, and by moral corruption. Suetonius is an imperial biographer, and he has an obsession with the most salacious anecdotes. Suetonius's concern lies in large part with the moral character of the emperors, and he sees that play out in anecdotes of scandal, debauchery, manipulation, and murder.
Suetonius, writing nearly a century later, portrayed Caligula's story as a moral lesson about corruption and how absolute power, when unchecked, could not just bring down an emperor, but could threaten the empire itself.
Caligula's actual name was Gaius Caesar Germanicus. His name reveals his aristocratic ancestry and lineage. Germanicus after his illustrious father, Gaius Caesar after his great-great-grandfather, who was none other than Julius Caesar, whose adopted son Augustus was the first ever emperor of Rome. Caligula's mother Agrippina happens to be the granddaughter of Augustus. His family was the most esteemed in all of Rome, what we now call the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the founding fathers of imperial Rome.
Caligula's father, Germanicus, is the nephew of the reigning emperor Tiberius, who adopted Germanicus as his own son.
Caligula's bloodline, his pedigree, couldn't be better as far as ancient Rome is concerned.
Caligula's father, Germanicus, is one of Rome's foremost generals. His work on the northern frontier is absolutely crucial to the stability of the Roman Empire. This is where the real danger is in this period.
The northern frontier was Rome's weakness. Beyond the Rhine, Germanic tribes were hell-bent on resistance. They had already destroyed 3 Roman legions at Teutoburg Forest. For the Empire, holding this line was about more than glory. It was about survival. Expanding was the only way to keep the threat at bay.
The army is completely crucial to Rome, both in terms of its actual stability and survival, but also in terms of its self-perception. The Romans, no matter how luxurious their lives in Rome become, still see themselves primarily as a martial people. Germanicus, as young prince fighting on the northern frontiers, emerges as a vision of the ideal Roman.
Caligula is no ordinary child. Because of his father's job, he's growing up in a war zone where violence and death is discussed every day. It's part and parcel of everyday life.
In the camps, Caligula was more than a mascot. He was a constant reminder of the dynasty's presence among the troops. He learned that power was carried not only by swords, but by names. Among the hardened centurions serving in these frontier wars was Cassius Correa, a soldier whose name would one day be tied to Caligula's downfall.
Caligula has grown up among fighting men, rough and violent, but he is still only a child, and although exposed to this world, is only there because of his dad.
As Caligula reveled in the glow of his father's fame, another presence loomed. Tiberius, the emperor. Even the adoration of the troops couldn't shield Germanicus from the perils of palace intrigue. At just 7 years old, the emperor's jealousy would change the boy's life forever.
It happens when the Emperor Tiberius sends Germanicus on this new mission to the provinces of the east. When he's there, Germanicus comes into serious conflict with a man named Gnaeus Piso, who is the Roman governor of Syria. This conflict becomes so toxic that when Germanicus falls ill, he tells his wife that Piso has poisoned him. And when his wife returns to Rome with Germanicus's ashes and with Caligula at her side, this is the rumor that spreads throughout the populace. Speculation is swirling in the city, and one of the rumors that is going around is that Piso did kill Germanicus, but he did so on the orders of the Emperor Tiberius, who had been jealous of Germanicus's success and popularity.
This was to become a defining moment in Caligula's life, and also for Rome.
The death of Caligula's very popular father in dubious circumstances greatly affects the emperor's popularity with the people. Caligula has lost his father and has learned something about the dark politics of power in such a deeply personal way. His father has been betrayed, seemingly because his popularity with the people has threatened the emperor's power.
When his father's body reaches Rome, the citizens line the streets. They are grieving this man that they viewed as the ideal, the perfect Roman. They are devastated. All except, curiously, the Emperor Tiberius and his mother. They stay inside the palace. So, it begs the question, were the rumors correct?
Tiberius eventually retreats completely from Roman society to live on a beautiful island in the Bay of Naples.
One motivation for Tiberius' move from Rome HQ to Capri is an ever-present fear of being assassinated. But there's another possible reason. Tiberius has developed terrible facial disfigurements from a mysterious medical condition. This may or may not have been connected to his sexual activities on Capri.
By the time he is 19, Caligula has been summoned by the emperor to Capri. There he lives under Tiberius's watchful eye. While elsewhere, his family suffer at the hands of the emperor's men.
So what must have been going through Caligula's mind? Here is the man alleged to be behind the murder of his own father, with his mother and siblings either in exile or imprisoned. And now he's being taken under his wing.
Fate can be cruel. Sometimes it has a twisted sense of humor. The man who may have murdered his father became his guardian. Raised on a cliffside villa by Emperor Tiberius, a paranoid, reclusive tyrant, Caligula learns early that in Rome, trust is a weakness. He was taught to survive in a world where power meant cruelty, and love was often paid for with death.
It seems clear from the ancient historical sources that Caligula was in fact being tested on the island of Capri to see if he was plotting against Tiberius.
While in exile, Caligula was baited to speak against Tiberius, but he stayed cautious, refusing to fall into the trap. He acted as if nothing had happened to his family, showed no sign of pain, and played the loyal grandson to perfection. So much so, people would later say there was never a better servant and never a worse master.
Tiberius has killed almost every member of Caligula's imperial family, and now he's demanding his presence on Capri. What must Caligula have been thinking? Is Tiberius bringing him to the island to prepare him to take over his rule? Or is he essentially bringing him as a hostage to keep him under house arrest, under constant observation? You can hardly imagine a situation better calculated to induce paranoia.
According to the writers of the day, Tiberius is determined to teach the teenager all the delights open to a man of great power.
Caligula is about to enter manhood, but he couldn't have wished for a worse father figure than Tiberius. I mean, wild debauchery doesn't begin to cover what they get up to on Capri. Pedophilia, torture, these are some of the most extraordinary stories that figures like Suetonius record about what happens on Capri with Tiberius and with Caligula.
He could not even then conceal his natural disposition to cruelty and lewdness.
Caligula was cruel, reckless, and drawn to vice. He took pleasure in watching punishments, roamed the streets at night in disguise, slipping into taverns and brothels, losing himself in singing and dancing. Tiberius looked the other way, hoping these indulgences might soften his darker instincts. But he saw the truth too clearly.
Caius is destined to be the ruin of himself and all mankind, and that he was rearing a hydra for the people of Rome and a phaeton for all the world.
The Hydra was this many-headed serpent, this water monster from Greek mythology. Phaeton was also from Greek mythology. He was the son of the sun god. Phaeton lost control of his father's chariot of fire and scorched the earth with it. Suetonius is setting this idea, first of all, that Caligula, he's not going to live up to the great reputation of his father, but also that he's this agent of chaos who will set the world on fire.
In 37 CE, Tiberius dies, and Caligula is there when it happens. Rumors spread across Rome. Some say he poisoned the emperor. Others claim he smothered him with a pillow or pressed his own hands to his throat. It wouldn't have been out of character. Caligula had spoken openly about wanting to do it. The Senate declares Caligula Rome's third emperor. By this time, the Roman Empire's territories span from the Rhine River in the north to Egypt in the south. But unlike his father Germanicus, Caligula has no experience in war, diplomacy, or government.
Caligula is ruling in the early years of the empire, after 500 years of republic. Remember, he is only the third emperor.
He is proclaimed emperor and has wide support. But in the Senate, there are still those who doubt his fitness to rule. As a young emperor, Caligula must prove himself able and quickly consolidate his power.
He has the bloodline, but he doesn't have any political or any military experience, no victories under his belt. Aware of this, Caligula doubles down on seeking popularity from the people. He lifts unjust taxes, he brings exiles back to Rome. Caligula has an incredible instinct for spectacle. There are chariot races, horse races, gladiator contests, plays, elaborate feasts. These are all really well calculated to curry favor with the populace, but to the Senate, they could really verge on looking like extravagance.
Very importantly, he shows his alliance with the Roman troops and the Praetorian Guard. He raises their pay and gives them bonuses.
All of this is undertaken to erase the memory of Tiberius. He is now gone. Caligula is the new emperor of Rome. He's also the ruler of most of the known world.
On the surface, he must have seemed like a good... the much-loved son of Germanicus. And so the people, they must have thought that Caligula would be able to follow in his father's footsteps, that he would have similar traits. He's also the complete opposite of Tiberius. He's young, he's energetic, he is in Rome. This feels like a complete breath of fresh air from the old, decaying, absent Tiberius. These are great credentials.
Coming as he did after Tiberius, who had left Rome with years of difficulty, Caligula would have been seen as a savior of sorts by the people and a return to glory. And he certainly made himself available to them in a way that hadn't been done before. He was out and about in public, and he funded extravagant entertainments for the common people to enjoy. But that didn't really reflect what was going on behind the scenes. It all really came at the expense of power in the Senate.
At 24, Caligula inherited absolute power with no idea how to wield it. When Tiberius died, the empire cheered. The young prince they once called Little Boots became emperor. At first, he gave them hope, but beneath the surface, the lessons of Capri were already seeping into his rule.
Caligula starts off by doing many of the right things. He emphasizes his link to his father. He makes sure that people don't forget that his father is Germanicus too. He puts his father's face on his coins so that people will see him on one side, Germanicus on the other.
Coins are a brilliant way to promote yourself as a leader. There's one with a very flattering portrait of Caligula and his name, Gaius Caesar, and on the other side you can see him standing on a pedestal, one arm outstretched, and he's talking to a group of soldiers, and it says at the top, a speech of the emperor to his troops, and underneath it, COH, short for cohorts of the Praetorian Guard. On top of all that, he's the great-grandson of Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, so he can also claim a direct bloodline back to the founder of the dynasty.
So what's the message in PR terms? Unquestionable lineage and support of the army. It's this double whammy for being a Roman emperor.
This sort of heady celebration that characterizes the early days of Caligula's rule are going to create a stark contrast to its precipitous decline.
Caligula's reign begins with great optimism, but it is to be very short-lived. Within only a few months, Caligula became seriously ill. Suetonius writes,
And when he fell ill, the people hung about the Palatium all night long. Some vowed in public handbills to risk their lives in the combats of the amphitheater, and others to lay them down for his recovery.
There are all sorts of theories as to the cause of this illness, but he very nearly died. Some say it was a series of seizures from epilepsy. Some say that he had some sort of mental health breakdown.
Ordinary citizens of Rome gather in public places to beg the gods for Caligula's recovery, some even offering their own lives in exchange.
There's the real possibility that he'd been deliberately poisoned.
What was going through his mind? Did Caligula think that history was repeating itself? Was he going to go the same way as his father Germanicus? Poisoned, murdered by a jealous political rival? Perhaps his illness reminded him of his mortality, reminded him of just how many people were trying to step into his shoes.
A sudden illness brought Caligula on the brink of death. Barely 25 years old, the experience changed him forever. He grew suspicious, isolated, and clung to the only person he trusted, his sister Drusilla. Caligula changes his will to make Drusilla his heir, making her the first woman to be named heir in any Roman imperial will, an attempt to continue the Julian bloodline through any children she may have. While Caligula is sick, Drusilla's husband Lepidus has the opportunity to rule. Whatever it was that caused his illness, a month later he had recovered. But Caligula had come away from this ordeal a changed man.
After this illness, his personality changes. It's after this that many of the stories of twisted and monstrous acts emerge. Suetonius portrays this as the moment that Caligula changed from Gaius the Emperor to Gaius the Monster.
He revisits the shameless and depraved habits he had developed a taste for back when he was on the island of Capri with the old Emperor Tiberius. Sex with anyone he pleases, including, allegedly, his own sisters. His favourite was Drusilla.
He lived in the habit of incest with all his sisters. It is believed that he deflowered one of them, Drusilla, before he had assumed the robe of manhood.
He whisks off the wives of senators mid-feast, for example, before returning to give his verdict on what they were like in bed. He gets several women pregnant. He's a heavy drinker, perhaps even an alcoholic. And Caligula has become paranoid, really paranoid.
Like much of Suetonius's writing, these accusations are part history, part gossip. Modern historians debate how much is fact and how much is political smear. What is clear is that soon after his recovery, Caligula begins systematically persecuting anyone he sees as an enemy or suspects of conspiracy.
He starts to kill off or exile those close to him and anyone he sees as a serious threat to his rule. He has Silanus, the senator, killed. Gemellus, his nephew and a favourite to rule next, also killed. And Macro, he's a senior Praetorian guard, killed.
Suetonius says that Caligula declares himself a deity. He's a god to be worshipped by the whole empire.
He ordered all the images of the gods, which were famous for their beauty, to be brought from Greece, that he might take the heads off and put on his own. In his temple stood a statue of gold, the exact image of himself, which was daily dressed in garments corresponding with those he wore himself.
Over time, the gap between Caligula's public persona and his private personality widened, and it produced a situation in which the empire and the role of the emperor became a cult of personality.
Caligula put his image across the empire on coins and on temples. He wasn't just the emperor, he presented himself as the embodiment of Rome itself.
How did Caligula see himself? He really leaned into this idea of divine descent. He may well have really thought that he was above human reproach, that his actions were not subject to the normal rules of human behavior. Caligula was the first Roman emperor to really lean into this notion that leadership was performative at a fundamental level. And he leaned wholeheartedly into it.
He pushed performance so far that he backed himself into a corner. There was no way left to be more outrageous. Then a tragedy strikes that brings Caligula abruptly down to earth. His sister Drusilla falls ill. When she died under suspicious circumstances, something inside him broke.
He's inconsolable with grief. At the public funeral, he mourns her like a husband would, not a brother. Caligula deifies her, consecrating her with the title Panthea, meaning goddess of all.
Statues of her likeness appeared in temples across the empire. Her face appeared on coins. For the first time, Romans worshipped a woman as divine. When the mighty feel pain, they make the world suffer for it. Caligula turned on his allies, his family, then the empire itself. Those who once celebrated him now called him a monster. And Caligula turned cruelty into spectacle. From Caligula's point of view, the Senate is the main obstacle to his absolute rule. He mocks and bullies them, and accuses them of conspiracies both real and imagined. It is now becoming impossible for the Senate to predict how Caligula might react to any matter put before him.
He's so famous for saying he's going to make a horse a consul. I think it's too simple to go with the interpretation of Caligula's behavior as that he was insane. I think he actually understood a very basic truth about the nature of authority and what the public wants from their leaders that no one else had recognized before. Caligula absolutely understood the power of spectacle in politics, and he manipulated it very carefully in the Senate. He turned the Senate into spectators, and he also made them unwilling participants on this theatrical stage show in which he made senators humiliate themselves on his whim.
He stripped power away from the Senate and replaced it with theater, forcing the senators to play along. But their obedience stemmed from fear, not loyalty. And sometimes Caligula's theatrics had fatal consequences. Suetonius tells us,
He forced Silanus, his father-in-law, to kill himself by cutting his throat with a razor.
Caligula accused Silanus of plotting against him, claiming he stayed behind when Caligula sailed into a storm, hoping he wouldn't return. That suspicion was all it took, and Silanus was ordered to die. Unlike his predecessors, Emperors Augustus and Tiberius, Caligula wants absolute power.
He wants to do what he likes, whether that be sex, murder, public executions, torture. This leads to a massive collision with the Senate, who no longer have any real power or influence over the running of Rome. All they have left is this facade, and Caligula ruthlessly smashes that down.
Only 2 years after becoming emperor, Caligula has alienated his closest allies, including members of his own family.
His initial popularity is crumbling under the weight of his caprice, his cruelty, his humiliation of members of his Senate. He trusts no one. He thinks anyone could be plotting to kill him.
The fact that dynastic power in Rome was so uneasy, that there were so many people in the family who could claim to be emperor, meant that you were only ever one plot away from being assassinated and from someone else within your broader family from taking over. I think it meant that the emperor was always, if you like, skating on thin ice. But that was probably okay if you were a fairly tough type. But if, like Caligula, you were a fairly psychologically weak character, then I think it could easily push you over the edge.
As if to prove his point, Caligula discovers a real conspiracy. And for him, it is of the worst kind. It comes from within his family. A family he has always tried to protect. His dead sister Drusilla's husband Lepidus and his 2 surviving sisters, Agrippina the Younger and Julia Livia, are plotting against him.
From this point on, our most detailed account of events comes from another historian, a man named Flavius Josephus. Born in Judea, Josephus had been a Jewish priest and a leader of the rebellion against Rome. When that is defeated, he comes to Rome, becomes a citizen, and writes a history that includes the most detailed account of Caligula's death.
Where Suetonius paints Caligula as a monster of vice, Josephus presents him as a tyrant, undone by arrogance and divine pretensions. A former rebel turned servant to the Roman emperor, Josephus wrote both to defend Rome's authority and to warn about the dangers of rulers who mistake themselves for gods.
According to Flavius Josephus, Lepidus has ambitions to seize the throne for himself. He conspires with Agrippina and with Julia. They plotted together.
Emboldened by their shared hatred of the emperor and their desire to see his reign ended.
The conspiracy was brought to light through intercepted letters and the testimony of secret informants. The discovery of this act of betrayal strikes a deep psychological blow to Caligula.
I think this betrayal must have felt like the point of no return for Caligula. Lepidus had been given a taste of what it's like to be an emperor by Caligula himself, remember, back when he'd been critically ill, when he named Drusilla his heir. He's recently lost his beloved Drusilla, and to Caligula, close family was very important, as he thought he could trust them like no one else. So once this plot is uncovered, it feels like he'll never recover from it.
For Caligula, this isn't just a political conspiracy to have him knocked off. This is a deeply personal one. His paranoia becomes all-consuming. This is a point of no return for him. His reaction is typical of Caligula. It's swift and brutal. It serves as both a punishment and a warning to others who might be considering a plot against him in the future.
Lepidus is executed, his body publicly displayed as a warning.
His sisters Agrippina and Julia are exiled. Their estates are confiscated. Caligula goes to every effort to make this punishment as humiliating and as publicly visible as possible. He makes Agrippina go back to Rome carrying the ashes of Lepidus, her alleged co-conspirator and lover, all the way. Regardless of how you read it, what we can say is that this event seems to mark a turning point and an intensification in Caligula's descent into paranoia.
Caligula did things like make a senator run alongside his chariot, or even pick up a weapon and fight in the gladiatorial arena.
From this point on, we see an increasing number of gory, gruesome stories about Caligula's utterly arbitrary cruelty towards his subjects. Suetonius, as ever, revels in the details.
After disfiguring many persons of honorable rank by branding them in the face with hot irons, he condemned them to the mines or to fight with wild beasts.
And that was just the beginning. People were punished for whispering during games, or for failing to worship his divinity. He forced parents to watch their sons die. He let a man rot in chains until the smell drove him mad. When meat became too expensive to feed his wild animals, Caligula simply fed them people. Caligula's evil and barbaric behavior is notorious across the empire. Everyone fears him, while Caligula himself sees danger everywhere.
You have to remember that this is Caligula's family. These are the people closest to him, and he loves his sisters. To think that one of them could be involved in this plot against him, well, it must have broken him. This is a clear message. For Caligula now, it's either you have unconditional, complete loyalty, or you suffer brutal consequences.
Now that all political power has been concentrated within this single family, all family disputes have become political and therefore potentially deadly.
But such actions also alienate those who might have been his most faithful allies.
Caligula's public persona and his outrageous behavior endeared him to the crowd, to the mob, who loved the bread and circuses that he provided. But it increasingly fractured his relationship with the Senate, and it gave them a reason ultimately to act against him.
Among those closest to Caligula is Cassius Correa, captain of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal security unit.
During the Roman Republic, the Praetorian Guards were escorts for high-ranking political officials, members of the Senate, procurators, and they were bodyguards for the senior officers of the Roman legions. In 27 BCE, after the transition from Roman Republic to Imperial Rome, the first Emperor Augustus turned the Praetorian Guards into the emperor's personal security unit. They were an extremely powerful group of men.
Cassius Correa was a senior officer of the Praetorian Guard. He had once served under Germanicus, Caligula's father, and was long loyal to the family. But Caligula repaid that loyalty with daily humiliation.
Caligula made fun of his effeminate-sounding voice and used to make him repeat vulgar words when Correa simply arrived to ask what the daily password was for the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard operated on a password system. There was a new password every day, and knowing the password would enable the Guard to have access to the emperor. Caligula humiliated Correa in public. He mocked his masculinity.
Correa has become the focus of Caligula's humiliations, questioning his sexuality and his loyalty in public. It reaches a point where he can tolerate it no more.
For someone like Correa, a man of honour, of huge integrity and high position, this endless psychological abuse becomes unbearable. He'd been on Caligula's father's military campaigns. He'd known him since he was a little boy, little baby boots. It must have been a really long-standing relationship.
This kind of insult in Roman culture went well beyond politics. It was a personal insult of the most deep kind. You don't tell a Roman man he's not masculine. And there were consequences for this. Rome was a staunch patriarchy, and so to question someone's manhood was to suggest that they were less than a good Roman.
Josephus writes,
The emperor's sharp tongue and public insults stoked a deep resentment within the soldier.
He describes how Correa becomes involved in this plot to take off Caius. In other words, to kill Caligula. He came in because he thought it a deed worthy of a free, ingenuous man to kill Caius.
Correa believed it was the act of a free and noble man to kill Caligula. He was tired of being mocked as a coward and knew that his friendship with the emperor put his life at risk.
But still, Correa was the most zealous of them all, both out of a desire of getting himself the greatest name, and also by reason of his access to Caius's presence, and could therefore the more easily kill him.
The Senate, long discontented with Caligula's tyranny, sees an opportunity in Correa's seething anger. They whisper promises of a restored republic, convincing Correa that the emperor's assassination was not only justified, but necessary for Rome.
The Senate are discontented with imperial rule, and especially Caligula's total disregard for their role within it. They've little or no power, nor have they shown the deference or given the respect that their name and titles are due. The senators play on Correa's wounded pride and sense of duty, framing the assassination as an act of patriotism. But their true motives were far from noble. They're simply trying to regain the power that they'd lost under the empire.
Correa had no doubt. Every one of Caligula's cruel acts made him more certain. He knew Caligula had to be stopped. More than once he considered striking during a feast, but he held back. It wasn't doubt, it was patience. He was waiting for the right moment. He was determined that when he finally made his move, he could not fail. On January 24, 41 CE, the conspirators enact their plan. Caligula attends a theatrical event. As he returns through a secluded corridor, Correa, with some of his men, is ready to exact his revenge.
Remember, these are Caligula's guards, so he feels safe. There's no danger here. And then the unimaginable happens.
Josephus writes, the emperor fell under a flurry of blows, his cries echoing through the empty halls.
Even in his final moments, he cursed his attackers, accusing them of cowardice.
Once Correa has struck the first blow, the other conspirators fall upon Caligula. It's said that he is stabbed 30 times. And this is an attack that is so savage and so violent that there are rumors that some of the conspirators even take bites out of Caligula's flesh. The conspirators are not simply trying to get Caligula out of the way. This is a performative statement. This is the first time an emperor has been killed in office. And it was done by men who had sworn to protect him, the Praetorian Guard.
Power in Rome was never static. Even the ones closest to Caligula turned. Cassius Correa, a man sworn to protect him, dealt the killing blow. Caligula's blood spilled in a palace hallway. The emperor is dead, just 28 years old, murdered by his own guards. But this betrayal was just the beginning. In the chaos that followed, Rome teetered between empire and republic. The Senate dreamed of restoring the old order, while the people feared anarchy.
Caligula's assassination exposed the fundamental vulnerability of the person of the emperor. They weren't, in fact, untouchable. They couldn't do anything they wanted and remain safe. And I think this precedent really would have changed how future emperors for centuries to come approached the office. They were more isolated from the people. They had to sort of withdraw a bit and just be very suspicious of everybody.
Caligula's reign has in many ways been defined by this tendency to humiliate. He has refused to abide by the fictions of the Principate that the emperor and the senators are really just equals. By treating the senators as though they were slaves, Caligula has revealed the totality of his power.
The role of the emperor was conceived with great nobility and to fulfill all great Roman values and virtues. But the case of Caligula shows that one man's personality could overturn all of those intentions.
It's this combination of total disregard for Roman political convention and personal cruelty that ends up with Caligula dead of 30 stab wounds in his own palace.
There's no job description for an emperor as such. The emperor can essentially do whatever he likes, and there isn't a lot the Senate can do about it.
Caligula's rule has been one of excess, cruelty, and depravity, creating fertile ground for betrayal. As for his paranoia, there is a reason why this may have been justified.
Caligula had bumped off anyone he felt was a threat to his reign. Such was his paranoia. In a way, Caligula was right to be paranoid, because many people were trying to supplant him. And that's because it was actually possible to do that.
Rome had been a democratic republic run by the Senate for over 500 years, until 27 BCE, when Augustus became its first emperor.
Augustus and his wife Livia didn't have any children with each other, even though each of them had children with previous spouses. What that means is there isn't a clear line of succession, a son to follow a father, a grandson to follow a son.
There's no fixed system in place for passing the power on other than bloodline, and that's Caligula's problem. Many members of the Julio-Claudian family could claim the right to be emperor. So when an emperor becomes sick or gets old or mentally unhinged, all sorts of people begin to jockey for power.
The assassination plunges Rome into chaos. The Senate, eager to restore the Republic, attempts to seize power. But their hopes are dashed when the Praetorian Guard intervene.
After Caligula's death, the Senate would have been divided. Certainly some might have at least hoped in principle to return to the Republic. But the reality was very complex. They lacked the military backing to make this happen, not to mention the public will. The Praetorian Guard kills Caligula. And what do they do now? There's no emperor.
The Praetorian Guard must act before the senators take command. Josephus writes,
The senators' rejoicing was short-lived, as the guards acted swiftly to secure their own interests.
Caligula is killed, and immediately afterwards, the Praetorian Guard finds Claudius hiding in the palace, and they pronounce him the new emperor.
For the first time, Rome's ruler was chosen not by the Senate, nor by bloodline, but by the army. The Praetorian Guard had revealed their true power.
This is an unprecedented role for a military body to take. And it led to some historians after the fact calling the Praetorian Guard a military kingmaker.
The conspirators thought they were ending a tyrant. Instead, they empowered another. The Senate tried to reclaim the Republic, but the Praetorian Guard had other plans. Claudius, Caligula's uncle, was declared emperor. The murder of an emperor is the ultimate crime, and those responsible have broken their oaths. Claudius must deal with the attack on his nephew. Justice demanded action.
Claudius is only emperor because he has benefited from Caligula's assassination, but he now needs to reassert the unchallengeable authority of the Roman emperor. most importantly, over the Senate and over the Praetorian Guard.
Caligula's assassination set a precedent that never went away. Every future emperor had to deal with a Praetorian Guard that was now not just a military protective force, but a political actor on its own. The Praetorian Guard killed an emperor and got away with it. That meant that every emperor afterward had to keep their eye on them.
For all the hatred that Caligula had garnered among the elite, he remained remarkably popular with the people of Rome. And so Claudius is in this very delicate situation. He needs to demonstrate to the Senate that he is not going to rule like Caligula, but he needs to show the people that he is honoring Caligula's memory. Claudius appoints a new leader for the Praetorian Guard, and he executes Correa and a few other key conspirators. The elite conspirators who had been so keen to have Correa do the job for them have now given him up as a sacrifice to their own survival.
Whether you classify Caligula's assassination as justice or power grab depends on how you define loyalty and justice. You know, the reality is the Praetorian Guard was made up of Rome's finest soldiers who saw themselves as embodying all of the best Roman principles of honor and tradition. Caligula had broken every one of those social norms during his rule. They were saving Rome's soul by eliminating this ruler. But by immediately asserting control, by choosing his successor, they put their stamp on the emperor's role.
In Rome, the cost of power was betrayal. It wasn't the exception, it was the system. No one got what they wanted. Not the senators, not the assassins, not even the new emperor. Caligula's death didn't end the violence, it simply prolonged it.
Correa's actions, though rooted in personal grievance, ultimately served the ambitions of the Praetorian Guard. The Republic the Senate dreamed of was never realized. Instead, the Julio-Claudian dynasty carries on.
Caligula's reign and his brutal end is a cautionary tale of power, betrayal, and ambition.
The emperor who ruled with fear met his end by it, leaving behind a legacy of chaos.
In life, Caligula had proven the totality of the power of a Roman emperor, but in his death, he demonstrated its limits.
I think Caligula's rule still fascinates because it's so terrible. It's an example of what happens when someone who is psychologically incapable of ruling gets into power and is able to indulge every whim and every cruel desire, every fantasy that they've ever had.
Caligula so perverted the expectations of what a Roman emperor was expected to be and to do that he really exposed the fundamental weakness in the system.
It's a stark reminder that in ancient Rome, betrayal was often necessary for survival.
In Rome, the emperor's power was never secure. It had to be defended through spectacle and fear.
The role of the emperor was established with all good intentions to espouse everything that was great about Rome. And yet, once in the office, some individuals focused far more on holding on to power than on actually exercising their role.
When the likes of Suetonius and Josephus are writing, we have to remember that Caligula's legacy has become completely tarnished. It's been spread far and wide. And so that's why we get all of these stories emerging, which may well have some basis of historicity, but are also likely magnified to the extreme to emphasize his vices.
Caligula's legacy is deep in madness and cruelty. But what if that's not the whole story? Everything we know about him comes from men who hated him. Maybe he truly was the monster they claimed. Or maybe history itself betrayed him. When absolute power is at stake, betrayal is guaranteed, and truth is often the first casualty.